I'm sort of a comedian, but I am actually here to talk about some pretty serious stuff. I really care about the role of morality in business. And I think that is largely because I never expected to become a business person. I actually grew up in the neighborhood here. My folks were divorced. My father was a leader in the Veterans Peace Movement. My mom is a junior college professor. They divorced when I was really little, and they basically never agreed on anything. Like, I could count on one hand the things that my parents agree on, but one of those things that they agree on is that spending your life doing some kind of good in the world is important. I am right now 36 years old. I've been making stuff on the internet for coming up on 20 years. And along the way, I basically realized if I want to keep doing this, I will have to figure out some way to make money. I've worked really hard all of that time. I've gotten very lucky, and now, as you just heard, I own a podcast network of about 30 shows. I have a pretty successful menswear blog. I'm occasionally on television, not to brag, but you might have seen me over the holidays in Discovery Channel's Christmas Through the Decades. Yeah, I was above Mr. Belding on the call sheet. I also once acted in a scene with Super Dave Osborne. So basically what I'm saying is I'm a huge success. But for a really long time doing this, I lived essentially at or below the poverty line. But these days, I have sort of surprised myself with the fact that I actually make a pretty good living. I make more money now than either of my parents ever did. And while I have, unlike them, never been a teacher and never worked as an activist, I do really believe that I have let morality guide me in what I do. So I thought that being here in literally the place where, and this is not a joke, I saw Jurassic Park when I was 12 with Spanish subtitles, would be a good chance to talk about some of the choices that I've made and some of the choices that you might have to make as you're pursuing an independent creative career. And I also want to make really clear that I am the furthest thing from a perfect person. I know I'm here giving you moral advice, but I am not a priest, I am not a therapist, I am not a moral philosopher. I am a guy that does his best. So I don't want anyone to think I'm judging them. I started a list of my moral failings, and it got very long, and I only have 20 minutes. But I thought I'd give you a few highlights. I once stole a toy car from Walgreens while I was on a family vacation. In high school, I started dating my wife about 4 or 5 days after I broke up with her best friend. I know, that one's pretty real, right? Shout out to School of the Arts, that's how we do it. I, for many years, used unpaid interns in my business. I did my best to treat them fairly, but they didn't get paid. And in my capacity as a comedian or a comedy podcaster, I definitely used language and talked about things in ways that hurt people. And I did it because I thought, I'm chill and cool, and I'm not malicious, and it's okay for me to do that. So those are just like a few of my failings. It's not a list of all of my failings, but I just want to make it clear that I'm just a dude, just like you're just a person, But I do think that in my career I've done more right than I have done wrong, and I've worked hard to do right rather than wrong, and I think that you can do the same thing. So I asked a lot of people I know who have similar careers to me, what kind of moral choices have you faced? What kind of moral advice do you have? I racked my own brain, and basically, this is what I came up with. I think it's 19 things. The first question is to ask yourself, what are you looking for from being a creative person. Why are you here doing this? If you want money or a job, then go get a job. If you want to create, create. And I know that seems like almost foolishly simple advice, but I mean it. It's for real. There's no greater satisfaction than making something, learning from the process of making it, than making something similar but better. And money is important. It makes room for that in your life. But if you are trying to be in this game, your goal has to be creating, not making money. And toward that end, it is okay to measure your success on a scale other than financial success. It is okay to do this part-time. It's okay to do this as a hobby. Never measure your success by whether creating is your full-time job. Measure by whether you are creating. This is the part that we warned you about. Actually, the warning that I suggested was I'm going to talk about how capitalism is fundamentally immoral rather than its moral failings. It's really important to recognize that capitalism is an economic system and not a moral system. And it's kind of a messed up economic system. And I'm not about to give you a Marxist dialectic or whatever, and in fact, I'm not even a Marxist. I understand why capitalism is. But it's important to understand that the context is that capitalism is never fair, and capitalism is often cruel. But it is the economic system in the world that we live in right now. So, let me say absolutely from the start, making more money does not mean you're a better person. It might mean that you're serving a market well, but it also reflects stuff like access to financial and cultural capital, skills that happen to be in demand from people who have money, and especially luck. Money is not an indicator of personal success or moral success. So, what that means in your life is free yourself from the connection between money and the value of your work, in both directions. So, if you aren't making the money that you want, know that it is not because you are bad. And if you are making money, know that it is not because you are good. But, and here's the but, also know that it is okay to try to make money. Because money is what we use to buy food and housing and take care of our families and take care of other people in our lives. Money lets you do more work, and if your work is good, if it helps people, if it helps you even, then it's great news if you're making money. So it's okay to want money, and it's okay to make money. Now, luck is, I've already alluded to it a few times. I don't mean when I say that luck is real that you can't put yourself in a position to be lucky. Obviously, if you work hard and you try to build opportunities, you come up lucky more often. But luck is an essential part of all successes, especially in capitalism. So don't presume that your successes are because you are better than others or because you worked harder than others. Capitalism is a system that encourages taking risks, and while you can influence the odds when you take those risks, they remain risks. There are no sure things. If you're making money and reaching audiences, remember that while you put yourself in that position to be lucky, luck was a substantial factor. And if you're not making money and you're not reaching audiences, then know that you cannot control luck. You can put yourself in the position, but luck is a bitch, right? So you control your choices and you control your work. You don't control luck. I think it's important to think about what you actually believe in, maybe even write it down, and stick to it. A friend of mine told me that she felt like her morals were the strongest when she got started because she wasn't dealing with temptations. She didn't have an understanding of, oh, this is how everyone else does it. she had a sense inside of herself of what was right and wrong. So now, decade and a half into her career, when she's not sure what to do, she thinks, what would I have done in year one? So I mentioned I have a menswear blog called Put This On, and on Put This On, I mean, look, the world of fashion marketing is a nightmare. It's a horrible morass of terrible people. And so we had to set, but I love fashion and I love clothes. And so I had to set some rules. We don't run sponsored content. If we cover an advertiser, we disclose that they're an advertiser in that coverage. We never take anything for free. All of those standards are not standard in the industry, and they're all things I decided at the beginning and have stuck to for a decade. And it does make it hard to compete against people who do not follow those same standards. But it also means that we have a reputation as a fair and trustworthy and decent source of information, and that is worth a lot more to me personally than $10,000 from a luxury watch company. So figure out at the start what feels right to you, what feels ethical to you, write it down if you need to, and then do it consistently. The internet is built to reward trolls and panderers, okay? You can make it to the middle or sometimes even the top by trolling and pandering. Both of those are things that engender the kind of passionate, emotional response that leads to clicks and likes and shares. And the platforms that we use, especially these days in the social media age, are set up to feel like games that you win by inciting people. And you can do that, and you can make money doing that. But the question is, why do that? Is that what you want from your life? To be somebody whose job is inflaming people? I bet that's not why you're here today. So don't. I used to do my show on college radio. On college radio, it's like, shout out to KZSC, the heavyweight 88, UC Santa Cruz. But on college radio, anything goes, right? Somebody's like, oh yeah, I love to play a Miles Davis song from Bitches Brew, and then I'll play a Nirvana Unplugged song, and then I play some Primus, bow, 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 bow. And then I love to play some ragtime music. And that is a great idea, and it's a great expression of the DJ's personal identity. But it's, the personal identity of that person is person who goes to UC Santa Cruz. Shout out to Hacky Sack, unicycles, etc. And that's great in principle. It's great to follow your muse, but if you are trying to improve the lives of others, if you're trying to serve others, it's important to remember that you have to make something that other people will care about or enjoy. And when you bring all of those things to the table at once, you are not having an additive effect on your audience, you're having an alienating effect on your audience. So at the end of the day, you have to make choices about who you are trying to serve with your work. If it's just you and you're making a train set in your basement, A-okay. If you're trying to reach people, you have to think about these things. That can mean compromising, but I don't think it has to mean compromising. I think in a lot of cases, it might just mean compartmentalizing, right? Like, I have a menswear blog and a comedy podcast for nerds that's a fake judge thing, right? And I understand that they don't have the same audience, right? I do them both because they're both parts of who I am, and they're absolutely for real, and I feel really passionately about both of them, but I don't pile it all on top of each other. There's a difference between focusing and clarifying and selling out, and you have to remember that you work for the audience when you are doing public work. If you believe in what you are doing, it's okay to promote it, especially to people who might enjoy it, be interested, or get something out of it. It is a great idea to think about balancing the time that you spend making things with the time that you spend promoting them. Certainly, I love making things much more than I love promoting things. But that said, here I am in front of you right now, right? I don't think, here's how I'll put it. It's a great idea to ask yourself, am I wasting people's time before you promote your work? And try not to let the little hater that lives inside you tell you otherwise. But it is important to recognize that, right? Like, don't post your fashion blog to the San Francisco Giants subreddit, right? Shout out to the San Francisco Giants subreddit. But I want to be clear that not promoting your work is not the definition of being artistic. That is not being artistic, that is being self-defeating. I think it's really important to pay attention to what your privileges are. I was an American Studies major in college, and like my mom has teaches ethnic studies. So this was like part of my life as a kid, but I'm so grateful to young nerds who are making regular people aware of what privilege is and forcing them to grapple with it. If you're in this room right now, having paid tens or perhaps hundreds of dollars to be here, you have tremendous privilege. Every single person in this room. There are a lot of sources of that privilege. You might have had access to capital at some point in your life that you could invest in starting a business, or use to cover the cost of education, or just control the risks that are inherent in creative entrepreneurship. My parents weren't rich, in fact, quite the opposite. Neither of them was even middle class until I was like 16. But I did know when I was in college and right after college that if I was hungry, I had a place to go, right? I was able to take chances with my life that I otherwise would not have been able to take. I went to college thanks to veterans benefits from the state of California. You probably had some of these economic privileges in your own life. You probably also had some social and cultural privileges. If you're a dude, you have had a lifetime of reinforcement of the idea that your voice is worth hearing and what you have to say is worth saying, right? If you're white, you probably have basically never been in a business situation where people who don't share a lot of your cultural background aren't in the majority. If you're straight, you've probably never had to deal with other people's expectations of what your skills or your personality are based on who you like to date. Those aren't the only examples of these kinds of privilege. There's also ones that apply to probably literally everyone here. If you're here, you live in the developed world, right? Your comfort every day is built on the backs of billions of other people. That said, please don't take away from this that you should be guilty about your privileges. You should be real about them, take account of them, be aware of them, but don't think of them as a burden. That's paralyzing, and it's straight up not helpful. Your privileges are an opportunity. You can make changes that accommodate people who are different from you in your work and in your life. You can help people who don't have the same advantages as you. You can surrender your privilege to other people. You can seek environments where you are forced to grow and learn culturally. You can rebuild systems even in just the small part of the world that you control and influence so that they include others. You can look for chances to use your privilege for good. Here's the thing. You can only account for your own perspective on the world, right? You see through your own eyes. Other people experience the world and whatever work you are making differently from how you expect them to. Part of your job as a creator is to listen to those people and process the way that they tell you they experience your work. I'm not going to get into a whole signified thing. I could. I went to college for that stuff. But you have to pay attention to how other people receive your work. And that includes people who are critical of your work. Look, I'm a comedian, right? you've heard comedians and what they do when someone tells them they're doing their job wrong. They destroy that person. Rhetorically, usually. And I certainly have the capability to do that, and every time it comes up, that's my first reaction, right? I'm like, F you, I'm gonna take you down, right? I know what I'm doing. I'm okay, because I'm scared, just like everybody else, right? But you have to listen, and that includes people who are telling you that they are hurt by what you did, or what you said, or what you made, and that is very tough to do. So if you take criticism poorly, and I would hold myself out as an example of someone who takes criticism poorly, is a daily struggle for me not to retweet people who are whinging at me and tear them apart, even though they have 12 followers. Remember that people are talking about, when people talk about your work, they are talking about themselves. They're talking about their own perspective, their own experience, their own baggage. They're not talking about your intentions or your ideas or what you intended to do. But you still have to find the time and the energy to listen to and consider others. It's not your job to prevent your work from ever hurting anyone or bothering anyone in any circumstances, but if you don't listen to feedback, you lose the opportunity to grow and get better and help other people more, which is the reason that we are all doing this. This is the one that everyone said to me. Anytime you come to a crossroads where one fork is about building equity, building long-term value, and the other fork is a pile of quick money, go with the long money, not the short. Unless you need to pay your rent or whatever, right away, in which case, go to town. I am terrible at asking for help. I grew up with divorced parents trying to take care of my parents. I grew up as a gawky, different white kid in a neighborhood where I had to be careful what colors I wore. I am all about independence and keeping my head up and not taking any mess from anybody and all that stuff, right? I always want to muscle through stuff. But as I get older and as I do this longer and longer, I understand how much I can benefit from other people's skills and experiences, and that sometimes asking for help isn't a burden on others, it's actually an opportunity for them to share and build with you. And if you're asking for help, you should also be giving help, connecting with a community of people who are working on things that are like the things that you're working on, sharing your expertise, learning from the expertise of others, and asking for help when you need help. And understand that when you ask for something, the other person can't always accommodate you. We all have our own stuff to deal with, especially if you're a public figure of some kind. You're probably getting a disproportionate amount of requests for help. But if you find yourself running into that situation, remember that you have just as much to gain from your peers as you do from your heroes. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I asked a drunk Ira Glass for advice one time at a party. But I've learned just as much from my friend Helen Zaltzman, who's in the same kind of position that I'm in. I have a great business that I'm really proud of, and I built that business basically by working 70 hours a week for $14,000 a year for 10 years, roughly speaking. But I was lucky. I met my now wife in high school, and we've lived together, so we share the risks and costs of our lives. I didn't have kids at the time. I didn't have any financial responsibilities outside of my immediate family. I just had to worry about myself, and I even stole my migraine medication from Kaiser. My mom would just refill her prescription and then send it to me. And I loved doing that. I love my work, and I was glad to work those 60 or 70 hours a week. I missed out on some parties and whatnot, but I love doing this stuff, and even though it was really scary, and I always wondered, am I ever going to break through, and I would be in tears in bed with my wife once a month, probably, I got by, and that set of priorities felt right. But now I have 3 kids, and it's different. And when you have other responsibilities and other priorities, it's okay to respect them. It's okay for it not just to be about you. I thought it was really apropos that the two issues of Indira's magazine that she brought to the tabling in the back are the workaholism and the anger issue. Like, it's okay to care about other stuff besides your work. A lot of people ask me, when should I or shouldn't work for free? A lot of people believe in never working for free, and I get that. That's not exactly my feeling about it. I don't think that money is the only reason to create stuff. It's an important piece of the puzzle because we all have to eat, but I don't know anyone who went into creative work because they thought this is the best way to make money. They went into it because they were doing this anyway because they loved it. If they were doing it to make money, they would have gone to law school, right? Or pursued a trade, or gone into finance or something. I don't know what rich people do. But they would have done one of those things. Literally, my dad thinks a career is peace activist. So how do you decide when to work for free? So part of it is a personal decision about money. Is the free work in lieu of other work that would pay? Well, then that's a very high standard, right? You'd better be doing some stuff that you really love doing if you're giving up getting paid, right? Is it in addition to work that you're doing to get paid? Well, then you're giving up your weekend. So it's still a pretty high standard, right? Even if, in that case, you have to ask yourself, is this as much an education as it is work? Am I getting immense satisfaction out of this, right? You know what the value of those things are for you. Judge it on those standards. But the main standard that I use is this. I try to work for free with somebody, but I avoid working for free for somebody, right? If I'm a participant in the equity that is being built, whether it's intellectual property or a company or a thing that we're creating, if I own it with someone, then yeah, we're both working for free, let's do it. Let's work for free. We're getting paid in a lot of ways, right? Practice, satisfaction, growth, the possibility some money might come out of this later on. But I want to be a participant. I don't want to be the person who is being exploited because, sorry, I said no Marxism, because someone else controls the means of production. And the other side of that is, if you get in the position that I'm in now, right now I have something like 15 employees and a few dozen people that I pay for things. When you work with people, you should pay them. And I don't, first of all, hold your applause, I'm not paying you. I don't even just mean that you have to give them like a real job. I think you should give them a real job if you're making money out of it. There's other ways to pay people. If you are actually teaching people things, I think that is a way of paying people. If you are building equity, you can share it with them. You can give them equity that is equivalent to the sweat that they put into something. But you need to pay people. People that work with and for you are not a resource that can be exploited. They're not an oil well. I think this is the most important thing. It's something a friend said to me. It's not even something I came up with, right? But she said to me, don't define your success by your earning power. Don't define it by the reception that you get for your work. Don't define it by the size of your audience. All of those things are real things that matter and have to be part of our thinking, have to be part of our lives, right? But they're also completely incidental to the thing that we are actually here for. Your goal has to be to do the work. To do it, to take stock, do it again better. Do it, take stock, do it again better. If you pursue your craft in that way, no one can take away the pleasure and the satisfaction that you get from creating. And I don't care if you're vlogging or building model train sets, right? That is yours. We are built, our bodies are built to get satisfaction from making things and improving our skills, right? Getting better at stuff. Ma and Pa from Little House on the Prairie got their satisfaction from making something, doing as good a job as they could, and learning from the process. That's what matters in the end. Now, get ready for it. This is my only slide with a picture. I'm very bad at PowerPoint. When I don't know what to do, I ask myself, what would Mr. Rogers do? And I know that sounds like a goof, but that is absolutely for real, okay? I have little kids. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So I've watched a lot of Mr. Rogers lately. It's on Amazon Prime, if you're wondering. And obviously, when I was a kid, I watched a lot of Mr. Rogers. Shout out to Channel 9, KQED. What's up? Mr. Rogers was an ordained minister. He was a real minister who kind of ended up working in TV, right? He had decided first that he was going to dedicate himself and his life to others, and by extension, to God. And I don't really care if you personally believe in God the way that he did, but I think you understand what he was trying to do in the world. And that happened before he even started making TV shows. He got into TV accidentally. A job basically fell in his lap in Pittsburgh, where he's from. And at the beginning, he had to make so much stuff, right? Because it was the live TV era. They had to go on and fill hours every day with a staff of like 2 or 3. So many shows, right? And he did it. He learned. He did it again. He learned. And he realized, I think that I could help people more doing this work that I'm doing here than I ever could being the assistant pastor of a church. And that's no shade on assistant pastors of churches who do really special things in the world. Now, Mr. Rogers, I'm sure, did well financially, right? I'm sure he had a beautiful house in Pittsburgh, right? I'm sure his kids were well taken care of. But that wasn't why he was doing his work. He did his work because he wanted to care for other people. He wanted to listen to them. He wanted to honor them and who they were. He wanted to protect them, and he wanted to help them. Even if they were little kids, especially if they were little kids. He was a careful businessman, you know? He was the guy who was out there fighting for public television. He was fighting for his own production company. He was also a careful and informed educator. This is a guy who learned from experts in his field, stayed on top of the research. He wasn't just like a magical dude, right? But to his last day, he helped people. And that is what matters. And I don't care if you are a graphic designer or a coder or a painter or a dancer, or you knit panda hats to sell outside AT&T Park. Fit in one last pander, speaking of not pandering. You're doing this work as an end in itself, for yourself, and you are also doing this work to touch other people. It's a big responsibility, but I think that you can handle it. Thanks.